Hello, I'm John Grom, and welcome to our 78th Right and Left Discussion Forum. We hold our panel discussion twice monthly to demonstrate that open-minded, civil discussions on potentially contentious topics can lead to a better understanding of the issues of the day. Today, our panel will discuss hate groups, what they are and what they aren't. Our panel, beginning on my left, is Bryan Laubaugh, president of R&B Financial Services. On his left is Dr. Ronald Chamberlin, retired senior research chemist. On his left is Jerry Ritzman, chairman of the board of Ritzman Pharmacies. And on his left is Patty Haskins, retired math teacher and member of the Wadsworth City Council. Bryan, according to those who track hate groups, particularly the Southern Poverty Legal Center, which is probably the only one that makes a list, they are indicating and have said that there is a significant increase in hate crimes in the United States. In fact, they indicated a 67% increase in the last 10 years. Yet the FBI, who also tracks crime, said that there's a significant decrease in that period of time. What do you make of that?
I think it's the definition of hate. I think if you describe a hate crime or define it as basically, lashing out at someone, whether it be taking away their life, maiming them in some way for the color of their skin or what they believe in, or those particular types of issues. I think if you kill someone, it's obviously there's hate involved. I don't know specifically how they define hate and what groups and what types of situations where they would consider it a hate crime. But I do know that just in the recent past, we've become much more sensitive to other people's feelings, and almost anything could be considered hate speech, hate crime. We've just had another rash of disinvitations on certain college campuses because the speech, the individual that would deliver the speech would be considered part of a hate group. So I think that we need to be careful about how we define hate. Obviously, any type of crime, anything that would harm someone else for whatever reason is not acceptable. But it seems to me that the definition has become very broad and very general in that anything that a person could possibly say or their actions, you're automatically labeled as part of a hate group or hate speech. So I think we need to look at what that definition is.
Why do you suppose we've gotten more sensitive to things like that in recent times?
I think there's a combination of factors. We have a generation of young adults that have been basically taken care of and enabled. Certain behaviors have been enabled as they've been reared. You can read plenty of studies about helicopter parents. There's parachute parents, helicopter parents. We even have parents that now move where their child goes to school. They actually go to that campus and they live off campus because they just cannot live without having their son or daughter nearby protecting them. And so they become, there's probably a thinner skin on those people. So, something that you might say or that Ron might say or Patty might say or Jerry might say, that would be considered offensive to them. And then all of a sudden they go from that to it's hate speech. And I've watched a couple of podcasts and watched a couple of live events where conservative speakers, just regular conservative speakers, have gone to campus to speak, and people are going off the rails because of that, and they're just beside themselves, and they label them fascists, and they hate people, they're bigoted, they're racist, and so it's just kind of gotten out of control, I think, with that definition of what hate speech is.
What do you think, Ron?
John, Bryan, that's a very interesting analysis of that. I hadn't really thought about that point. I don't think anybody here would think that there were not hate crimes. or hate groups, and I too found it difficult to find any statistics other than the Southern Poverty Leadership Council.
I think that they're the only one that keeps them. They're the only ones that
Apparently
make a
so,
list.
although the FBI does have information, and I did
Yeah,
find
but they don't make a list.
I did find a site where they had individual papers and reports
Yeah.
that you could look up
Yeah.
and read on
Yeah.
the Freedom of Information Act published there. But I did look at a map that the SPLC had put out, and they commented, I wrote down a couple of statistics. They felt there were 892 active hate groups in 2015. I counted the map, there were 25 in Ohio. These are mostly skinhead fascist types, but there's some Ku Klux Klan, there's some what they call Christian emphasis groups.
Patriot groups?
Yeah, as hate groups. And,
Patriot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they say it was up 14% in 2015. You commented that the FBI has found a decrease. That's a pretty big chunk. I think they overreach a little bit, and we have to be careful about that. They tend to lump the patriot groups in there, the people who are conspiracy nuts and are just against the government, like the people that took over the place in Oregon. You know, they weren't really, not really so much a hate group as an anti-government group. Still wackos, but still
or pro-private property groups.
Private property groups, exactly. Somebody commented, one of the commenters I read says Donald Trump has inflamed, electrified the radical right, because some of the things he's saying ties right into those kinds of feelings. And other people, primarily liberals, say have never been more ashamed to be an American with what's going on and that kind of thing. I don't know if that's new. The SPLC has tended, I think, to you have to be careful about who you label a hate group. At one point, they labeled Dr. Ben Carson as hate speech because he said he was opposed to same-sex marriage, and he was doing it on religious grounds, not because of hate grounds. I know lots of folks who are opposed to that. And I don't consider them hate mongers.
But there are a lot of churches on the hate group list of the SPLC for that very reason.
For that very reason.
Yeah.
And they tend to pick up church groups who are opposed to same-sex marriage. For that reason. Now I think such groups just don't understand biology personally, but that's my own opinion. They don't understand that homosexuality has a biological basis, has nothing to do with biblical stance.
It would put someone on the list to disagree with what you just said.
Yeah, exactly.
You make the list. Yeah.
So, but anyway, I think it's true that we're probably a little more sensitive than we were, and trying to pick up offense when none is meant. And I don't know about the helicopter parenting thing and so on. That's beyond my particular purview or my particular experience. But if anything, I was the other way around. So,
Yeah.
Jerry, where do you come down on all this?
Well, I think my thought is that it's in the definition. Let's draw a parallel and then maybe go off on a tangent. There's been a marked...
The math teacher thought what you just said was funny.
Okay. I don't know the definition of that, Patty, but I mean mathematically, but I can picture it in my mind. Let's take a look at... They say that hate crimes have increased by whatever percentage. Let's take a look at a parallel that says, another math term, parallel that says there's been a lot of increase in sexual assault on college campuses. Number one, what's the definition?
It's changed.
The definition has changed. I mean, it can get as far out there as somebody charging a partner, a former partner, with sexual assault because the former partner, when they were in the relationship years ago, gave this person, the other partner, a kiss while they were sleeping. And this was then later charged as sexual assault because it was not done with that person's consent. I don't know, but that I read that a few months ago, and it just reminded me. We said we were talking about the definition, so that was defined as an incident where there was a charge of sexual assault, and I don't get it. But as far as hate crime and that type of thing, I think we really are treading on a difficult ground here because it not only is in situations like this But in many other situations where an individual has not observed or seen the behavior that they are commenting on, that we have become really good at reading other people's minds. We've become very good at saying so-and-so did this because of that. And we do not know. We don't know if somebody committed this crime against this person because they were hateful or because they were whatever, whether it was a rage and had nothing to do with that. But we're very quick to label or to read other people's minds.
I heard what you said, but I know what you meant.
That's exactly right. And you did this because, and we need to be really careful, I think, about passing judgment on other people from second, third, and fourth hand reports. If we can't actually observe it, we can't be certain that that was what happened, and most of the time we can't be absolutely certain as to why it happened by reading the other person's mind. One example that I have, and that just hit me yesterday when I read because this can lead to a mob mentality. And I read the blazing headlines in the Beacon Journal yesterday, Scarborough is out or he's resigned. And to me, as I read this whole thing, this was a mob mentality
This
thing.
is the president of Akron.
President of the University of Akron, and resigned. And I'm thinking this whole thing, as I read it through the months, this was like a mob mentality. People had their mind made up, they wanted him out for whatever reason, because of his branding effort, because of his cost-cutting efforts, because of all this thing. I think, I don't know, I can't read their mind, that it appeared like that people get on the bandwagon and all they want to do is get the person out. And this is mob mentality. And in mob mentality, in my opinion, I'll tell you what I think, the mob mentality won. Here's a guy that was asked to come in and do a tough job, straighten things out, and try and move the university forward, which he did. And you cannot make things right without changing. And so he gets criticized for change because we want things the way they always were. And oh, by the way, he's out, let's plan a party. That's embarrassing.
Okay. Patty,
I'm off the tangent.
without continuing with his line on Mr. Scarborough, can you tell us what you think about hate groups?
Well, I was thinking in terms of hate crimes, and you mentioned the definition earlier, and that the hate crime, though, is a violent act performed against someone or something. It can be against an organization, based upon a bias that you have, whether it be by race, religion, sexual orientation, any of those things. It's interesting to find that, in researching this, we've heard in the past about lynchings, which were obviously hate crimes, that term goes back to the 1700s. And the term lynching comes from a gentleman by the last name of Lynch, who was trying to retaliate against citizens of the United States who were siding with the British. And they did these very quick trials, non-trials, and then punished those people. Unfortunately, though, the actual hate crime against, for example, against blacks, were not dealt with until the early 60s during President Johnson's reign. And a lot of it was sparked by the killing of 3 workers, 2 black, 1 white, from the North, who went to Mississippi to register blacks to vote. They were stopped, they were killed, brutally killed. Their car was burnt, there was law enforcement involved, and it wasn't till their bodies were finally found that something was done about it. It became part of the Civil Rights Act, I believe, that this established what hate crimes were. And this is the reason we have them, because at that time, people were being killed because of the color of their skin and for other reasons. And even though they didn't have that term hate crime, it existed. And that was thought to be a greater problem than anything else. Interestingly, in that case where those 3 were killed, they convicted 6 people of it, and they were sentenced to 3 to 10 years.
Not until many years later.
And not
though.
till many years later. So, and I think because they were so much older, that
And we had changed as a nation.
exactly.
Well, Mississippi had changed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, now we're looking at hate crimes. I think they're down, and the report I read from the FBI is that the actual numbers are down.
Yeah.
A lot would depend upon your classification.
Yeah.
If you're adding more groups into this, then you would increase the number of hate crimes.
Adding more things as hate
Yes.
crimes. Yeah.
And I hear it from both sides. For example, I hear from the right that there's a war on Christmas, that there is a war against Christianity here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at religious discrimination and hate crimes against religious, Christianity is like almost 0. It's down at the bottom. The top of the list is Jewish, which I was kind of surprised. I thought it might be Muslims. Muslims are second. However, the number of hate crimes involving Muslims has increased, which you might expect because of the conditions in this country recently. So you put all of that together, and I think hate crimes do exist. And I think that perhaps if there is a decrease, it is because people are being better educated and in tune with what a hate crime actually is. And that's why maybe perhaps some people are becoming more enlightened as far as how to treat other people.
This might be
There really isn't any doubt, excuse me, John, there really isn't any doubt about the high-profile cases, the Matthew Shepherds, the Amish school children, the church incident in Charleston. No doubt about those. I think it's these more subtle things that are a doubt here. And it's kind of bias and prejudice carried to an extreme in a way. And I personally, I've had really hard to get rid of these biases. For example, I had some relatively unpleasant experiences with folks from India and supervisors or whatnot. Now, I'm not going to say that the only good Indian is a dead Indian. But I realize, dot, not feather. But anyway.
You just triggered half the audience.
Absolutely.
Ron
But I
Chamberlain
realized
stated
that
by the
going to
way.
come pouring in.
But I had realized that that's not a prejudice against the Indian nation or the fact that folks are from India, just those particular individuals. There are lots of people we don't like for very good reasons.
And
But
I think,
you can carry that to extreme. You got
that's
hate.
the point, though, is that when you have an experience and you build up a bias, or depending upon what it is, maybe it's you have a bias against plumbers because the guy that came over to fix your hot water heater took you for an extra $300 or something. Is that hate? I'm just and that's where people all of a sudden we take this giant leap that all of a sudden and jokingly I said it triggered half the audience. If he was on a college campus and you said that, they would have run you out in a mob mentality, out of that campus because you
Boy,
can't.
has that changed?
It has, and it's like you cannot even express yourself in even this particular type of forum without someone getting upset and leveling a charge that you hate them, and it's not. It's a bias. You're not walking around. You're not trying to run people over or anything like that. So
I don't think that rises to the level of a hate crime because it's not a violent act. You refer to hate speech. I mean, this is how you feel. When I think of a hate crime, and again, if you look up that definition, there is a violent act that goes along with it, and in some cases it is obvious that it is.
This might be a good time to look at a couple of definitions of what a hate group is or what a hate group does. And one of them by the Southern Poverty Law Center. They describe it as hate groups are groups that have beliefs or practices that attack or malign an entire class of people, typically for their immutable characteristics or their unchangeable characteristics. The FBI describes a hate group this way. A hate group's primary purpose is to promote animosity, hostility, and malice against persons belonging to a race, religion, disability, sexual orientation, or ethnicity/national origin, which is different from that of the organization. they don't talk specifically about what an example of a hate crime, but when I think about Black Lives Matter, well, let me back up. A hate crime has been defined by the SPLC in some cases as painting a swastika on the door of a Jew in a dorm. That's a hate crime. Carrying a sign that says pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon by the Black Lives Matter movement is not. I have trouble distinguishing between the two. And there are a lot of people that think that Black Lives Matter should be considered a hate group. The Southern Poverty Law Center does indeed include the Nation of Islam, the New Black Panthers, and other groups as hate groups for their preaching against white people. But isn't that what the Black Lives Matter movement does?
I'm not sure it started that way.
No, I was going to say.
No, it didn't. It started on a false narrative to begin with.
Well, I think they have extremists in the group that feel that way, and I can go back and look at the Tea Party groups, and with the you talked about the signs that were carried by Black Lives Matter. If you look at the signs that were carried by Tea Party groups,
absolutely, very racist.
Very racist. Now, was the entire group that way? And so to label the entire group that way, the purpose of Black Lives Matter, as Ron mentioned, was not to go after police and to be anti-white. It was to support blacks. Has it evolved? And definitely, but with some, it has definitely evolved into something different. But I could see why there's some problem with labeling the entire group that way.
In fact, there is a person that goes by the name of King Noble. Are you familiar with that name? He has a radio program called Blog Radio, and he describes himself as a member of Black Lives Matter, and that he calls on the radio, on the air, calls for the killing of white people and police of any color. And he says he represents Black Lives Matter.
I think that would, in my book, that would qualify as hate speech. And we're starting to see it's been very quick because media, this stuff spreads like wildfire because of the media. It goes from, probably a sincere effort to bring attention to the plight of individuals in a urban, poverty environment, the blacks that live there. And all of a sudden it morphs into this militant group with people that are on the fringe. It wasn't that long ago where several policemen were killed, just outright cold-blooded murder because of this mindset that it's time to get even. An eye for an eye type of thing. So I would think that would be.
I guess part of the caution is that I think there's some evidence that this kind of language can inflame folks who aren't particularly members of that particular organization, but as kind of justification for their own violent actions. Right. We've seen a couple of cases of that recently.
And then we need to be careful too about people claiming to speak for a particular group. Say, I speak for X group. Well, do you really? Who appointed you? Who asked you to be the representative of this particular
I think as
class
whites,
or group of people?
We need to be cautious not to play the victim card, though, because what I hear too often is, how dare this group claim discrimination? What about me? I'm being discriminated against. Hate crimes in the history in this country, without a doubt, have not been against whites, although I'm sure there have been some. We have to be careful not to play that victim card, and to recognize that hate crimes are a problem and hate speech is a problem, and only then do we help to solve that problem.
Let me throw this question out on the table. There is a new series, a renewed series on Roots that started on Memorial Day.
Right.
And I've watched a good portion of it. And thinking back to the original Roots program, the series that was
Wonderful.
widely hailed and all, It seemed to inspire a lot of, back to my origins kind of feelings on the part of blacks, and I think it inspired a lot of naming of children after African, well, not sounding names, but actually African names. Watching this one in this day and age, and watching the horrible treatment of blacks being captured as slaves and on the slave ships and brought to this country and the way they're treated and so forth. I'm wondering if it's going to inspire a different kind of feeling, more of a renewed resentment of white people.
I haven't watched the new one because
well, I don't think you even have to watch it. Just think about
Yeah.
the whole Roots story being told again in this generation.
the original was so wonderful.
Yeah.
I really didn't want to spoil it by watching this.
One of the black musicians, I think Kanye West, says, "Don't watch Roots." Says this, well, we don't need to bring up this kind of treatment that our people have seen. He was against it.
I have to tell you, when
He was
I was
against
watching it, I was thinking, don't show that stuff anymore. You know,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
made me ill.
Yeah,
In fact, I could only watch it for so long, it just caused me to think: is the reaction of the African American community going to be different than it was the first time around?
There possibly could be, and you have to think that the portrayal then and now is a reflection of the times that we're in.
This was not too long after the whole civil rights movement began.
I was just going to ask the date.
It was
The
probably
original?
pretty important at the time to have
Sure.
that.
The original was the early 70s.
Right.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
It was. Unfortunately, we've gone from celebrating the victories of the civil rights movement to downplaying them now in this generation, and it's sad that we do that. But the my whole question is: do groups that are pro civil rights, do they need to justify their existence by calling more and more things hate crimes and all? But that's for another time. Thank you very much. I think this was a very good session.